United Nations Charter of 1945. Preamble. We the peoples of the United Nations determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to mankind, and to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of men and women, and of nations large and small, and to establish conditions under which justice and respect for the obligations arising from treaties and other sources of international law can be maintained, and to promote social progress and better standards of life and larger freedom, and for these ends to practice tolerance and live together in peace with one another as good neighbors, and to unite our strength to maintain international peace and security, and to ensure, by the acceptance of principles and the institution of methods, that armed force shall not be used, save in the common interest, and to employ international machinery for the promotion of the economic and social advancement of all peoples, have resolved to combine our efforts to accomplish these aims accordingly. Our respective governments, through representatives assembled in the city of San Francisco, who have exhibited their full powers found to be in good and due form, have agreed to the present Charter of the United Nations, and do hereby establish an international organization, to be known as the United Nations. Chapter 1. Purposes and Principles. Article 1. The purposes of the United Nations are to maintain international peace and security, and to that end, to take effective collective measures for the prevention and removal of threats to the peace, and for the suppression of acts of aggression or other breaches of the peace, and to bring about by peaceful means, and in conformity with the principles of justice and international law, adjustment or settlement of international disputes or situations which might lead to a breach of the peace. To develop friendly relations among nations based on respect for the principle of equal rights and self-determination of peoples, and to take other appropriate measures to strengthen universal peace. To achieve international cooperation in solving international problems of an economic, social, cultural, or humanitarian character, and in promoting and encouraging respect for human rights and for fundamental freedoms for all without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion, and to be a center for harmonizing the actions of nations in the attainment of these common ends. Article 2. The organization and its members, in pursuit of the purposes stated in Article 1, shall act in accordance with the following principles. The organization is based on the principle of the sovereign equality of all its members. All members, in order to ensure to all of them the rights and benefits resulting from membership, shall fulfill in good faith the obligations assumed by them in accordance with the present Charter. All members shall settle their international disputes by peaceful means in such a manner that international peace and security and justice are not endangered. All members shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state, or in any other manner inconsistent with the purposes of the United Nations. All members shall give the United Nations every assistance in any action it takes in accordance with the present Charter, and shall refrain from giving assistance to any state against which the United Nations is taking preventive or enforcement action. The organization shall ensure that states which are not members of the United Nations act in accordance with these principles so far as may be necessary for the maintenance of international peace and security. Nothing contained in the present Charter shall authorize the United Nations to intervene in matters which are essentially within the domestic jurisdiction of any state, or shall require the members to submit such matters to settlement under the present Charter, but this principle shall not prejudice the application of enforcement measures under Chapter 7. Chapter 2. Membership. Article 3. The original members of the United Nations shall be the states which, having participated in the United Nations Conference on International Organization at San Francisco, or having previously signed the Declaration by United Nations of the 1st of January, 1942, sign the present Charter and ratify it in accordance with Article 110. Article 4. Membership in the United Nations is open to all other peace-loving states which accept the obligations contained in the present charter and, in the judgment of the organization, are able and willing to carry out these obligations. The admission of any such state to membership in the United Nations will be effected by a decision of the General Assembly, upon the recommendation of the Security Council. Article 5. A member of the United Nations against which preventive or enforcement action has been taken by the Security Council may be suspended from the exercise of the rights and privileges of membership by the General Assembly, upon the recommendation of the Security Council. The exercise of these rights and privileges may be restored by the Security Council. Article 6. A member of the United Nations which has persistently violated the principles contained in the present charter may be expelled from the organization by the General Assembly, upon the recommendation of the Security Council. Chapter 3. Organs. Article 7. There are established, as principal organs of the United Nations, a General Assembly, a Security Council, an Economic and Social Council, a Trusteeship Council, an International Court of Justice, and a Secretariat. Such subsidiary organs, as may be found necessary, may be established in accordance with the present charter. Article 8. The United Nations shall place no restrictions on the eligibility of men and women to participate in any capacity, and under conditions of equality in its principal and subsidiary organs. Chapter 4. The General Assembly. Composition. Article 9. The General Assembly shall consist of all the members of the United Nations. Each member shall have not more than 5 representatives in the General Assembly. Functions and powers. Article 10. The General Assembly may discuss any questions or any matters within the scope of the present charter, or relating to the powers and functions of any organs provided for in the present charter, and, except as provided in Article 12, may make recommendations to the members of the United Nations, or to the Security Council, or to both on any such questions or matters. Article 11. The General Assembly may consider the general principles of cooperation in the maintenance of international peace and security, including the principles governing disarmament and the regulation of armaments, and may make recommendations with regard to such principles to the members, or to the Security Council, or to both. The General Assembly may discuss any questions relating to the maintenance of international peace and security brought before it by any member of the United Nations, or by the Security Council, or by a state which is not a member of the United Nations in accordance with Article 35, Paragraph 2, and, except as provided in Article 12, may make recommendations with regard to any such questions to the state or states concerned, or to the Security Council, or to both. Any such question on which action is necessary shall be referred to the Security Council by the General Assembly, either before or after discussion. The General Assembly may call the attention of the Security Council to situations which are likely to endanger international peace and security. The powers of the General Assembly set forth in this article shall not limit the general scope of Article 10. Article 12. While the Security Council is exercising in respect of any dispute or situation the functions assigned to it in the present charter, the General Assembly shall not make any recommendation with regard to that dispute or situation, unless the Security Council so requests. The Secretary-General, with the consent of the Security Council, shall notify the General Assembly at each session of any matters relative to the maintenance of international peace and security which are being dealt with by the Security Council, and shall similarly notify the General Assembly, or the members of the United Nations, if the General Assembly is not in session, immediately the Security Council ceases to deal with such matters. Article 13. The General Assembly shall initiate studies and make recommendations for the purpose of promoting international cooperation in the political field and encouraging the progressive development of international law and its codification, promoting international cooperation in the economic, social, cultural, educational, and health fields, and assisting in the realization of human rights and fundamental freedoms for all without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion. The further responsibilities, functions, and powers of the General Assembly with respect to matters mentioned in paragraph 1b above are set forth in chapters 9 and 10. Article 14. Subject to the provisions of Article 12, the General Assembly may recommend measures for the peaceful adjustment of any situation, regardless of origin, which it deems likely to impair the general welfare or friendly relations among nations, including situations resulting from a violation of the provisions of the present Charter setting forth the purposes and principles of the United Nations.